Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 5. In the very last episode, we had left off at the end of Exodus chapter 2. And I just set the stage. Moses had murdered an Egyptian officer. Thought he had gotten away with it, buried him. But then the next day, the Hebrew slaves called him out for it. Because in the slave quarters, like I said yesterday, I doubt there was really a lot of space. I'm sure someone probably witnessed his crime, and they did, and they call him out for it. So then Pharaoh learns of it. He wants to kill Moses too. So Moses flees all the way to Midian, and Midian's quite a distance away from Egypt, but he flees all the way to Midian. He gets married, meets a new family, a woman named Zipporah. He has children with her, and he starts a life in Midian. That's essentially where we leave off. And his father-in-law is the priest of Midian. As you can see, let me show you. Okay, so Egypt is all the way over here on this side. Moses fled all the way from there to over here somewhere in the land of Midian, which is quite a far away, long way to go. He must have been really scared. I mean, that's just my opinion. But anyway, so he starts his new life, his kids, he's a shepherd, and he's on the mountain of Horeb in Midian, when all of a sudden, the bush is on fire. Well, he's like, wow, this is a weird sight. I'm going to go and check this out because the bush is on fire, but yet it's not burning up. So, he goes up to the bush. Then a voice comes out of it, which says for him to take his shoes off and not to come any closer. The ground he's standing on is holy ground. And that the person or the being entity talking to him is the God of his fathers, his forefathers, like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, all of them that came before him. And he basically explains that he knows that the Israelites, are miserable, they're enslaved and they're miserable, and he wants Moses to help him to free them, basically. And Moses, being like the humble man of the Levite tribe he is, he's like, but who am I? Why should I go? I'm nobody. And then, God or Yahweh, he tells Moses, well, no, you're going to go rescue them. Then you're all going to come back here to this mountain and worship me. Simple as that. And Moses is like, no. Well, who are you? Okay, what if they ask me, who is this God? What should I tell them your name is? What should I tell them? And then Yahweh responds, at least according to this version of the Bible I'm reading, in Exodus 3, verse 14, God says to Moses, I am who I am. And the footnote says, or it could be also translated into, I will be what I will be. Very strange and cryptic answer. Then he tells Moses, he's like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to march your butt back over there to Egypt, and you're going to gather up all the elders of the Israelite tribes. You're going to gather them all up for me. And then you're going to tell them that I've seen how miserable y'all are, and I'm going to get you out of here. And I'm going to give you that inheritance I promised your great-great-great-grandfather, Abraham. You're going to pretty much take over the land. Or, well, I don't think he tells them that they're going to have to take it over at this point. I think at this point he's just letting them know, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give it to you. The land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The land of Canaan. And he says, but don't worry, the elders are going to listen to you. They're going to listen to you. Because I'm going to, perform all these signs so that they know you're telling the truth. So then he, gives, Moses, 3 signs to perform to prove to them who he is, that he's actually communicating with Yahweh. Now, the first sign he was going to perform was the staff that he had in his hand. In front of all the Egyptians and the elders, the Israelite elders, he's going to throw the staff down on the ground, and it's going to turn into a snake. But then, as soon as he picks it back up by the tail, it'll turn right back into a staff. That's the first sign he's supposed to show them. The second sign is that if Moses sticks his hand in the cloak he's wearing and pulls it out, it'll look like it's diseased. Then he's just got to stick it back in, stick it back out, and it'll look like it's all healed and restored. That's the second sign. Now, the third sign has to do with the Nile River. He goes to the Nile River, takes some water out and throws it on the ground, and that water will become blood. So those are the 3 signs that he's supposed to perform. Now let me repeat those 3 signs just in case you missed it. Of the great, wonderful, powerful Yahweh, the 3 wonderful signs he's supposed to give. The first one, his staff turns into a snake. The second one, his hand magically gets diseased. And then the third one, water turns to blood. Now, this is just me and my opinion. But, I mean, maybe those little tricks and stuff would work back then, like using fear and whatnot. Because none of those sound like really good, quote, miracles. They sound like pretty scary and horrendous miracles, in my opinion. So, like, you know, I'm just thinking, like, those miracles would not have that same effect today. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, today, he would probably, like, you know, be leaning towards the more good miracles. You see what I'm saying? Because, you see, now we're a little more perceptive. Like, when we see, like, quote, miracles like that, we're more hesitant. It's like, well, that looks more demonic, you know? I'm just saying, like, these don't sound like good and wonderful signs to me. These sound somewhat demonic. That's just my opinion. So then after all this, Moses is like, you know, he's like, pardon me, but, like, I'm not good at, like, speaking. Like, Moses had a stuttering problem. He wasn't a very good public speaker. He's, like, really slow to talk and things like that. Well, this kind of makes Yahweh a little angry. He's like, excuse me, who's the one who gave you all mouths to talk with to begin with? I did. I'm the one who chooses. Me. Well, Moses, once again, he's like, pardon me, but please send someone else. Please don't send me. I am not the right one. Well, Yahweh kind of loses his temper with Moses. This is starting to get on his nerves a little bit. Well, he gets mad, and he's like, well, what about your brother, Aaron? I know he can speak well, and he's already on his way to meet you, and he'll be glad to see you. And then he basically tells Moses that you're going to speak to him, you're going to put words in his mouth, and I'll help both of you. And I'll teach you both what to do. I mean, these last couple verses, well, not the last one, but verse 16 and 17 of chapter 4. Very interesting. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take his staff in your hand, so you can perform the signs with it. Now, this, I'm not going to lie, this kind of confuses me, because we had just finished reading how Moses had his own staff. He had his own staff, and it did the same thing. But now that he's supposed to get Aaron to help him, now he's supposed to do these same signs with Aaron's staff? So, I don't know. I know that's not that significant, but I don't know. It's a little confusing, because you'll see later that he does use Aaron's staff and not his own. So, I don't know. It's a little confusing to me. So, anyways. So, Moses returns back home to his wife and his father-in-law, and he tells his father-in-law that he needs to go back home to Egypt. Well, not home, but back to his people, and to see who's still alive. And then Jethro, his father-in-law, who seems like a pretty supportive fella, he's like, okay, I wish you well. And then, Moses packs up his wife and his family and brings them with him on a donkey, and they all head back to Egypt. Now, I think verse 21, Exodus 4, verse 21, it's very interesting, because it kind of shows you that from the beginning, Yahweh wanted it to be as difficult as possible for the Israelites to be able to leave. Let me read it. The Lord said to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. So, maybe you're wondering what I was wondering when I read this part again. But it's like, why? Well, why would you do that? Well, let's keep reading. Verse 22 and 23. Then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son. And I told you, let my son go, so he may worship me. But you refused to let him go. So I will kill your firstborn son. Now, this is why it's so important to really take this whole statement in. Okay, so what is he exactly telling Moses? He's telling Moses that he wants him to go and to free the Israelites. But then the scripture says he warns Moses that it's not going to be easy and he's going to make it hard on purpose, like when he didn't have to. And then he's going to tell Moses that it's all going to accumulate in him killing Pharaoh's firstborn son. When it didn't have to escalate to that. He's making it escalate to that. It literally says that. Like, I'm not pulling that out of my butt. It literally says that. But let's continue. But it doesn't even really stop there. Now, this next passage is very confusing in my opinion. But we're at Exodus 4, verses 24 to 26. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to talk about it. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. Moses. The Lord was about to kill Moses. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it, and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. So they were already on their way to Egypt. Okay, that's important. They were already on their way to Egypt. They stopped at a place to sleep. Now, I don't know if Zipporah was maybe changing a diaper or what she was doing. Maybe she was breastfeeding. But somehow or the other, it came to Yahweh's attention that the baby or the child was not circumcised. I'm thinking, I don't know why else he would go to try to kill either him or Moses. I'm not really sure. But then, as soon as Zipporah circumcised her son, the Lord left him alone. Which kind of reverberates back to the covenant that was made between him and Abraham. You see, we haven't even gotten to like the Ark of the Covenant yet, or the tabernacles, or those festivals. We haven't gotten to any of that yet. That's all Moses' thing. Well, we'll get to that. Right now, we're still at the one rule that Yahweh has between, him and like Abraham and his descendants. Is the circumcision. That's like the first rule that was ever established. And that wasn't even just for the Israelites. That was for like pretty much all of Abraham's descendants. So like the Ishmaelites and like the Midianites. So it was like a rule for all like those Semitic peoples that descended from Abraham. I don't know if it was Yahweh's way of marking them. Like, I've talked about this in other videos. It was either mark them like cattle. Maybe it could have partially been for health, but like I said, I think that was just a byproduct. I don't think that was the original intention on making them circumcise themselves. That's just my opinion. It doesn't really seem like Yahweh really cares all that much about them. That's just my opinion. But, so, apparently Moses hadn't followed that rule or whatever, and him or his son were about to die as a consequence until his wife, she's like, oh, I know what this is about. Or maybe she was told, and then she does it, and then they're left alone. Then they continue their journey. Either by force, coercion, or maybe by will. Maybe it's just all voluntary. Who knows? But the guy sending them has already tried to kill them once, so I don't know. You tell me. But anyways, before they arrive in Egypt, they meet Moses' brother Aaron out in the wilderness. Then, they all, reconnect and hug each other, missed each other. And then Moses shows Aaron all the signs and whatnot. And Aaron, agrees to help him. They both ascend the elders of Israel, and then they all believe. Not the people of Israel, the elders. The elders, like these magical signs and whatnot, were just supposed to be for like the leaders. That's a pattern that you see from here on out. Like it's like just the elders and the leaders of them who get to see all this stuff. Well, I mean, not all of it. The people certainly witness some stuff, but like, you know what I mean, like the one-on-one contact and stuff like that. That happens with the elites and prestigious. Because, because Yahweh's such a God of humility and all that. So let's move on to chapter 5. When Moses and Aaron approach Pharaoh for the first time. And this is what they say. Exodus 5, verses 1 to 5. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." And then Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword." But the king of Egypt said, "Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to work." Then Pharaoh said, "Look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working." So yeah, Pharaoh just like pays them no mind whatsoever. Not only that, he's like, "And by the way, why aren't you two working? You two get back to work and stop with this nonsense." So Pharaoh, I'm probably in his mind is hoping that they don't like go and like start any kind of rebellion. So he basically sends the order out, like, "Okay, look, this is what's going to happen. Don't give our slaves any more straw. They're going to have to go gather it on their own from now." Because at that point, I guess they were bringing them the straw so they could make the bricks and whatnot. They're like, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to let them go get the straw themselves. So that way they're so busy they don't even have time to listen to all this nonsense." Is basically what they did. And if they don't want it, but they got to make the same number of bricks. Like there can't be any slowing down in production. And beat them if you have to. So then they start working them extra hard. And I think this is important too. And they had their overseers, it sounds like, were mainly Israelites. So like they would appoint like some of the slaves to be in charge of the other slaves. Like, to keep some of the Egyptians from having to do some work. So the Israelite overseers were the ones who were supposed to tell them all these new quotas, make them do all this extra work, but have the same amount of bricks. And then when they went to go to appeal to Pharaoh about it, he's like, okay, this is what he says in Exodus 5, verse 17. Pharaoh says, "Lazy! That's what you are. Lazy. Lazy. And that's why you just want to go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw. Yet you must produce your full quota of bricks." And the Israelite overseers knew they were in trouble, because it was like they knew their people were in trouble pretty much. And so they leave Pharaoh, and on their way out, they see Moses and Aaron. And obviously they're not very happy with Moses and Aaron. They kind of feel like they're responsible for doing all this because they've kind of been like obnoxious, is what they say, is the word they use. Let me read the verse. It's verse 21. And they said, "May the Lord look on you and judge you. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh, and his officials have put a sword in their hand to kill us." So I think it's important to keep in mind that before Moses and Aaron, walks in there, yes, they are slaves. The Israelites are slaves. But it wasn't like quite as bad as that, where they were willing to make it worse. You see what I'm saying? Like, and this is just my opinion about it. I could be totally wrong. But I kind of feel like if it really was as dire and as oppressive and as awful as, like, you know, Yahweh had said to Moses originally, previously, then I don't know. You would think, my thoughts is like, but yet they could still go there and make it worse for them. And enough to the point where it's obviously not desperate enough where they're like, yes, thank you, Moses and Aaron. You know, it's now or never. It's okay. We got to get this done. Even if it makes it worse for a while. We got to, you know, it's, I don't know. It's like, yeah, they don't seem very happy with Moses and Aaron for what they're doing. And that's just, you know, listen, I'm just reading what the scripture says. They're literally mad at them. I mean, before they had, like, food provided to them. They had the straw that they had to use to make the brick provided to them. Isn't that a little strange? If they were really treated that bad, why would the Egyptians even provide them with straw to begin with? Is kind of my thoughts here. I'm just trying to piece it all together. I mean, obviously, there's not a whole lot of context, but there's bits and pieces. And I don't know. It just sounds off to me. And Moses seems to somewhat agree with him at first a little bit. Because in Exodus 5, verses 22 to 23, Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Why, Lord, have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued them at all." That's exactly, listen, I was just reading from the Bible. That's what Moses had to say in that moment, at that situation. It was like he was told something in Midian, then he gets there and realizes he's just done nothing but cause trouble for them and make their lives even worse. This is where we're at so far. Alright, now we're in Exodus chapter 6. But then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country." Then, oh my God, then he says something really interesting. Listen to this. Okay. Verses like 2 to 4. God also said to Moses, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. But my name, I am. I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan where they resided as foreigners." So a couple things to note here. Now, in the ancient Canaanites, their main god was named El. And up until this point, I didn't know this. According to the footnote, up until this point, they had been calling their god El Shaddai. I don't know if that was once they went to Canaan or if it was always, I don't know. It must have been once they went to Canaan because it says when he established his covenant in Canaan. In the Canaanite language, their god is either El or El. And once Abraham gets there, God appears to Abraham as El Shaddai. So that's something very interesting to note, in my opinion. But he also okay, let me, it's just super interesting. When he established his covenant with them in the land of Canaan, where they resided as foreigners. So that's, yeah. And part of that covenant, one, was that someday he was going to give the land to them. In exchange, basically, they got to circumcise all their males. That was the covenant with Abraham. So, Yahweh continues telling Moses that, he's heard how oppressed that they actually are, and that he remembered. Apparently he had forgotten for a little while, but he suddenly remembered that he made a covenant with Abraham. And he wants Moses to go and tell them, that, I'm going to, free him. I'm going to free him with an outstretched arm and mighty acts of judgment, and then take you as my own people. They're going to love it. So Moses is like, all right. And then he goes back, tells them. They don't listen. They don't want to hear it. Which I thought was interesting. Like I said, things were so terribly bad, you would think that they would take any offer of salvation. I mean, I don't know. That's just me. But they didn't listen. They didn't want no parts of it. And so, Moses goes back and, he tells Yahweh, he's like, they're not going to listen. They're not listening. So, new plan. Yahweh wants him to go back to Pharaoh. He wants him to go back and, to tell them again, to let them go. And Moses was like, but wait a minute. If they're not going to listen to me, my own people, why would Pharaoh listen to me? Like I said, I can barely even talk. I'm very socially awkward. I stutter a lot. So then at some point, Aaron comes along, or maybe Moses went to get him. Because then Aaron joins the conversation between him and Yahweh. So Yahweh's talking to Moses and Aaron now. And he basically, explains to them their lineage all the way from Levi. And here's something that I thought was interesting. One of the sons of Levi has the same name as Moses' son Gershom. It's just off by one letter. It's just like Levi's son Gershom is spelled with an N, whereas Moses' son is spelled with an M. I thought that was very interesting, because I thought it meant foreigner. But anyways, I don't know. I just thought that maybe they're just totally different. I'm sure that one letter, it makes it a big difference. So, I'm not going to speculate too much on that. But skipping all those, family lines and clans and lineages, we go back to Aaron and Moses, and then they realize how that they were related to Levi. And then Yahweh tells Moses and Aaron again. So when you bring them out of Egypt, you're going to bring them out by their divisions too, according to their families' divisions. But you're going to bring them out of there, pretty much. And that Aaron's going to do all the speaking for Moses. And Exodus 6, verses 28 to 30. Now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me? Once again, he tells him, why would he listen to me? So then he says, well, Moses, you're not going to have to say anything. You're not going to say anything. You're just going to stand there and look like a god to Pharaoh while Aaron does all the talking for you. You're going to be like God. Aaron's going to be like your prophet. That's what Yahweh told Moses. Okay. Yeah, we're in chapter 7 by now. And chapter 7, verse 3, he tells him again, but I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he's not going to listen. And then I'm going to judge Egypt for it. So that way, and then we go down to verse 5. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it. So, Moses and Aaron, with the magic staff, Aaron's staff, not Moses's, they go and confront Pharaoh. And they do what they were told. Aaron throws his staff down, it turns into a snake. And every time he picks it back up by the tail, it turns back into a staff. Well, the Pharaoh doesn't seem that impressed. He's like, my magicians and sorcerers can do that too. So he fetches them. And sure enough, they're able to do the same thing, which is I thought was very odd. They throw their staffs and stuff down, they become snakes. The only difference is that Aaron's staff or snake eats the others. Just gobbles them up. Interesting, right? So, but yet, just like Yahweh promised, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And he's like, those Israelites, they're not going nowhere. Not going nowhere. They got work to get done. They got my statues to build in my face. They're not going anywhere. So, I'm sorry. Anyway, so Pharaoh, his heart's hardened, won't listen, won't free anybody. So it begins like a crap ton of plagues from beginning to end. And, they pretty much start... You know what? No, they don't even start mild. They start pretty brutal. Okay, first plague we get to is the plague of blood. Now, it kind of seems to switch between Aaron and Moses. This first plague, performed by Aaron, he goes out and meets the pharaohs and his officials early in the morning on the Nile River. And he's supposed to, stretch out his hand and strike the water. And then, not just at the Nile, he's supposed to start at the Nile, where the pharaoh's at, so the pharaoh and his officials witness him doing it. That's going to turn into blood and stink and kill all the fish and not be undrinkable. Then he's supposed to go to every other canal, pond, stream, and reservoir and strike every single one of them, turn them all into blood. All of them. All the water sources. Everywhere in Egypt. And it even says, even vessels of wood and stone. Supposed to have blood in them. Now, Pharaoh didn't think this was anything special. He asked his magicians to do it, to see if they could do it, and they did. So he's like, okay, nice try. No, they're not going anywhere. Go back to building my face. So 7 days pass, and then Yahweh tells Moses, all right, go ask him to free them, and tell him that if he doesn't, I'm going to send a plague of frogs in the whole country. And Exodus 8, verse 3-4 says, the Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace, and your bedroom, and onto your bed, into the houses of your officials, and on your people, and into your ovens and kneading troughs. The frogs will come up on you and your people and all your officials. High to low. And this plague's performed by Aaron. And he's supposed to do the same thing, stretch out the staff over all the water sources. And they'll sounds super gross. They'll just bubble over with frogs. And they'll just start going everywhere. And I like frogs, but ugh. Now, the Pharaoh's magicians could also do the same thing. However, Pharaoh they must have been getting on his nerves pretty bad. He couldn't just ignore them like he could the bloody water. And he, asked Moses and Aaron, he's like, all right. Just have him get rid of the frogs. They're getting on my nerves. So, Moses and Aaron prayed to Yahweh, and then all the frogs suddenly die. They just die. So then the people have to, take all the frogs and put them in big piles of heaps and stuff, and apparently they start to stink. The whole land starts to reek of dead frogs. But, then once the Pharaoh saw there was some relief in the land, then he was like, okay, well, I'm not going to listen. Now that the frogs are gone. That's that. Maybe he thought they could do their worst. I don't know. But it continues for quite a bit. The next plague, also performed by Aaron. This time, instead of striking the water, he's just supposed to strike the ground. And the dust of the ground he strikes all around him will turn to gnats. And that the gnats will crawl over everyone. But, this time, the magicians in Egypt, for the first time, could not reproduce this trick. They couldn't do it. And they said, oh my God, this has to be God. we can't do it. The gnats are on the people and the animals everywhere. But the Pharaoh, his heart was hardened and he wouldn't listen. Just as Yahweh had said. And it literally says that in verse 19. Just as Yahweh had said. Now, the next plague. You see, whereas the gnats were on all the people everywhere and all the animals, this next plague, which is the flies, they're going to do the same thing, except they're going to leave the Israelites alone this time. So that way the Egyptians will see that Yahweh makes a difference between the Israelites and the Egyptians. Okay, I'm going to finish this chapter 8, and then I'm going to leave off on this for right now. But okay, here in chapter 8, Pharaoh tries to compromise with Moses and Aaron. And he tells them, he's like, well, what, can you guys just sacrifice to your God here? Because they weren't asking necessarily for him just to free the Israelites permanently. They were asking just to go for a couple days. So Pharaoh's like, okay, well, I'll compromise with them. I'll let them sacrifice to their God here. And he knows that they want to sacrifice. But check this out. Exodus 8, verse 26. But Moses said, that would not be right. The sacrifices we offer the Lord our God would be detestable to the Egyptians. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? We must take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, as he commands us. Now, keep in mind, they already know that they're going to perform sacrifices. And I don't know much about Egyptian history, but I do know that there have been times where they have not also been above, animal sacrifice or whatnot. In the rare occasion, human sacrifice. I think they only did that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they only did that, when the Pharaoh would die, they would sacrifice, his, household servants to, join him in the afterlife. I think that's what they would do. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a scholar. But what I want to know is what sacrifice is so detestable. That's what Moses said. They would see it as so detestable. Why? What would be so detestable to them? I mean, Pharaoh already had an idea that they probably would sacrifice, animals, but, was there something else? Now, I know that, cows were sacred to them and whatnot. And that could possibly be it, but I don't know. I kind of feel like after... I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe it is just the cows. Could be. But we do know that they do sacrifice firstborn sons too. The Israelites do. I don't want to hear anyone come in and tell me differently and say that they didn't do that. Because they most certainly do. You just got to find the right verse for it. And we haven't gotten to that point yet, but so no one, just in case anyone wants to know right now what verse it is, hold on, which verse is it? Hold on. Here we go. I found the verse. If anybody wants to go look at it, it actually says it. Here it is. Ready? Nehemiah 10, verse 36. As it is also written in the law, they're talking about the law of Moses, we will bring the firstborn of our sons and of our cattle and of our herds and our flocks to the house of our God, to the priests ministering there. It literally says it. Their firstborn sons. It was a condition. Nehemiah 10, verse 36. There you have it. Could that be the sacrifice that they're referring to? Sorry, I didn't mean to get ahead of myself, but I thought that was a pretty important verse to share. Because if you Google it or ask AI if they did that, it'll always tell you no. But there it is, right there. Black and white. Nehemiah 10, verse 36. Look it up. Have a good day.